I was the game design and development manager for the Panini DBZ game and playtester on the old one, and just a avid fan of the old Score games in general. I see you have the Inuyasha thing behind you, so
Yeah, but it's been coming up a lot in conversation. Actually, I'm surprised how many people remember the non-DBZ Score games fondly.
Yu Hakusho. That's
So people love. It's crazy because I think more people love Yu Hakusho now than they did when Yu Hakusho was actually being sold.
Absolutely. There's a market for it now of collectors and stuff that probably didn't even know when it was going on. It was a good game for several sets too.
It was a good game for like 2 sets, and then the wheels went off the wagon on
that. Yeah, like the first set 3 started getting a little crazy, but then after that it went insane. But yeah, the original concept was really cool.
Set 3 was, I don't know if you did much Yu playtesting back in the day, but set 3, the original draft of it was like playing mono blue. Like every deck was mono blue, was like what the game had turned into. So they wanted us to do like a complete redesign, and this happened because somebody infamously in a meeting said, "I'd rather masturbate with a cheese grater than ever play that game again."
And he made like every set in one night.
Yeah, and then they were like, "You guys fix it," and it goes to print in 3 days. And
all the art was incorrect because we had, yes, I was on that set. We had like, there's Rakuyakai stamp cards that don't have Rakuyakai.
Yeah, in the picture. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like
I'm sitting at TGA Fridays around that table and just going through an Excel spreadsheet and be like, we're going to change what this does. We're going to change what this does. I don't care what it looks like.
And it worked. It was a game. So
well, people really enjoyed that set too. Like there's a whole group of people that just love playing with kind of like ridiculously broken stuff. And those people loved the game after that point. Like there's guys that were like, I love it because I can just go infinite with my deck.
Eric Kunkel, it was one of them. Yeah. That set was also the one that started having all the multiple foil patterns. So that was like, oh, you could get the Kid Buu pattern, you could get the Trunk Saga. So
I know that got really crazy. So I think on the last set of Yu Hakusho, which was like 5 or I don't remember exactly how many we did.
5 or 6.
Yeah. But I know we were only contracted to do like 5 or 6 sets. Like there was never going to be more after that. And we did like the math one day. And we were like, it's impossible to complete like the rarest foil set. They didn't print enough of the cards.
They didn't make enough.
I was like, I'm fairly positive that there's not enough of those cards in circulation to complete like the rare set. So I'm pretty sure the only way that the collectors ever got that finished was like the years afterwards buying all the Score employees play sets, because we actually received the factory
like full 3X.
Yeah, with every foil pattern, and I'm fairly positive that was the only way that those cards like ever saw the light of day. So I was like, I don't know how you'd ever complete the set. The case count on this is way too low for this variant stuff to ever be able to complete the set.
That final set of Yu Hakusho was very tense playtesting because pretty much every deck won first turn and went infinite. So it was just showing each other, here's my infinite first turn. You can ask Kunk about some of our playtesting and that. Like it was ugly at points because the game just got out of control.
I remember Kunk would just he got to the point where he wasn't even bothering printing the proxies anymore. He would just use those sticky notes
because it was going to get changed on.
Yeah, and he would just shuffle them all on the table and be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or whatever. Here's my opening hand. Look, I went infinite.
Enemy controller, joystick, whatever the other one was.
Yeah,
good times.
Some of that crazy stuff. But I can I don't know how much you played before that, but I remember we played a game, me and this other guy, Ryan Carter, before it got like unmono blued the entire game, and it took us like 4 days to finish the game.
To finish one match.
Yeah, because whatever the win condition was, where you had to have like 500 cards or something like that. It was like
ancient tactics.
We were both playing that deck. And we just kept playing.
Oh no, a Sarayashiki mirror match.
Yeah. And that's when we were all kind of like, I don't think this is going to work out, guys. We need to change some of this.
There was since the game had no deck limit, there was like a West Realms, like a regional equivalent or a big tournament for that, whatever. And I was playing a mill deck, and one person there had like an ancient tactic deck. But I was like, just don't let me get paired with. I can't deck him, obviously, but I didn't play him. But
I forgot that mill was like real predominant in that game. That was like one of the like Rukukai or somebody's like mill. Yeah.
Their mill card shuffled itself back. Yeah. So you just use Yoko to fix your top, draw into it, and then chain them. Yeah. Still, it was fun. A tangent to DBZ or whatever, but this is all tied into DBZ. It's like all integrated in the playtesting, in the ideas that overlap between them, the art design people, obviously. So
like even the card games and card effects kind of went on after they showed up in other games. So, well, that was a little nice tangent about that's cool. I know there's a lot of people that are always super interested about Yu Hakusho.
That's another stream you could do. You could do a separate Yu Hakusho retrospective.
Info problem. A lot of people just like, whenever I think about it, I go into like post-traumatic stress syndrome, kind of. So I don't talk about it that time very much.
Yeah, it was crazy, some of the happenings going on at the time. But
so let's rewind a little bit pre
2001. Get back to DBZ. 2002.
Pre playtesting times, and let's talk about when you were actually like a player of the game, because you played when I played as a game, and
yes,
when Ape was doing his championship run. And Valdez was in his heyday and all that stuff. So what was that like?
So of all the card games I played, which is like probably most, the one I had most success in was definitely DBZ. It's definitely probably because I had the most success in the one that I enjoyed the most. But it's a very unique game compared to other game engines and stuff. It doesn't play like anything else. So if you're able to play and enjoy DBZ at like what was a high level or whatever back then, it was a feeling you didn't get in other games. Like it didn't, I curved out, or like I made a good anti-deck, whatever. It was like kind of Wild West. Like, yeah, we had deck lists and stuff, but not really, like net decking didn't exist as much. But just on the topic of decks, let me see if I can get the screen share thing to work. Do you have screen sharing disabled?
Oh, I may have it on there. Let me see. There we go. Try it now.
All right. Okay, so just so that I can keep track of each thing. Okay, so if that's showing up right now. So like in Saiyan Saga, I'm sure everyone remembers Fanatics, or some people remember Fanatics Gaming Network and stuff. Before that though.
Did you play the game during Saiyan Saga?
Oh yes, I played what I think was the earliest public debut was at Comic-Con. They didn't have boosters, they only had starters. Mm-hmm. So like that was my introduction to it. And then the first person to make the Apprentice patch, we played like in Saiyan Saga. But then before Fanatics existed, there was King Kai's Planetoid, and that was still Ray J. Still Ray J ran it. But I would see someone named Brian Valdez, or his name actually at the time was SSJ Pato or something. I would see him posting Saiyan Saga deck lists and being like, oh my gosh, this game is way more broken than I realized. Because like, you could run, for people that don't remember this, in the original set, you could run multiple copies of each Dragon Ball. They weren't restricted. You could pop non-combats during the non-combat set. You didn't have to enter combat to do it. So basically you could like anger out or ball out just entirely during
like a
not having a combat.
Yeah.
And it was really fast. And like the only
2 turns.
Yeah. And then like the only deck, the searchers were not restricted. Vegeta's plans, Goku's Lucky Break, the other ones. The only beatdown deck was just Goku's physical, getting back Goku's physical, or like infinitely looping with battle pausing, because those weren't errated yet. But Valdez was the first person to put those into like, oh, I'm like reading Inquest magazine or Scry or whatever, seeing those in a post, and he named them. It was like Picalypse, Dominator, that was another one in Saiyan Saga. So these were really dumb decks, by the way, like completely uninteractive, not fun to play at all, but it was like cool to see someone posting, wow.
Yeah, because this came up in one of our previous videos that I did about just how important those fan groups were at that time, just for card games in general. Because like the idea of going online to get all your strategy was really new, and in a lot of ways was still very primitive. Like Inquest and Scry were the main reasons that most people were stumbled across like new decks and Magic and
Pojo was a huge one early on too. Like IQ even did deck stuff for Pojo.
Yeah.
And I remember reading
I
that.
forget there was like a Pojo magazine kind of thing.
There were a couple DBZ ones too, DBZ only issues. Like there were deck breakdowns and stuff in it, price guides, which is always hilarious.
I remember I had the one that had IQ set breakdown of, I think, World Games in it.
And Goku's Blinding Strike was not in top 10 or something.
Number one card was Cosmic Backlash or something like that.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, just seeing Valdez posting screenshots or posting deck lists and stuff early, and then eventually that website became Fanatics and more people started coming there. Frieza Saga was basically the same broken stuff. It's just you had MPs, Goldo and Nail, that were like, I think they were in the highest bracket or the second highest bracket, and everyone else, even in their highest, was still in A.
Yeah, that's just because they didn't update the power chart.
But it still didn't really matter because it was still just you win during non-combat set. Like, here's another thing people might not remember: non-combat or combat enders were blocks. Like, you didn't have to use an action to play Nappa's Blinding Stare or whatever. You stopped with a Blinding Stare and it ended combat. So like you couldn't win by attacking ever. Then Trunks Saga, which Chippy deserves a lot of credit. I don't know who worked on this set besides Chippy.
Okay, so this was, I know a little bit about the behind the scenes stuff. This is when because those first two sets were done by Jim Ward.
Right, and it's just completely out there.
Well, it makes sense when you know a lot about this, because Jim Ward came up on a previous thing that I did, and I interacted with him a couple of times. But he was one of the guys that helped Gary Gynex create Dungeons and Dragons.
Wow, and I had no idea about that.
Yeah, he was from Milwaukee. He's actually quite legendary in the early Wild Wild West, like Atari eras of tabletop gaming. He was knighted by the Queen of England. He's been honored all these things, and he's considered like one of the founding fathers of modern tabletop gaming. And after learning a lot about that and having interacted with him one time, he created that game. And basically his background was writing role-playing stuff. So when you look at the card effects, it's like the Spirit of the Earth heals you.
Yeah.
Punch your opponent. Draw. It very much reads not like a card game, but like if you're building a role-playing strategy. Like
and some of those prototype cards, some of the prototype stuff that you have that we were talking about earlier, the cards have stage directions on them. It says like said while grinning or with menace or something. Yeah. So yeah, it was really. See, I didn't know that about him, about his background. And that's interesting because obviously a lot of DBZ engine is like total mess and it has nothing to do with regular card game conventions and stuff. But obviously there's also a certain brilliance underlying to it that we found, something to play out of it that we enjoyed for so long. So it makes sense that he comes from that pedigree of game design and stuff.
It was real interesting too, because you remember the huge delay between Saiyan Saga and Frieza Saga? So I found out about what happened there. So the Japanese, they spent like a year or 2 years working on just Saiyan Saga. And the reason it took so long is the Japanese, in their original contract, required 1 day approval per a card.
So the bigger the set list got.
So there was
like a year turnaround.
300 cards in the first set. So they did it kind of like that way, and then it took like a year and a half to just get the cards approved, because if something got bounced back and sent for reapproval, another day.
Right.
So during Frieza Saga, he actually flew to Japan and met with the licensors and sat there at a table and went over every card with them and got it done over 2 weeks, because they were like, we got to get a product out. It's been 8 months. We can't just sit here and wait for them to say no.
That makes so much sense because of all the arbitrary set decisions and set breaks and stuff. I always wondered, Frieza Saga is 80 episodes, 100 episodes or something, and it's like 130 card set compared to the other ones. And it's like, what gives? Well, now it makes perfect sense. He didn't want to get approval for all of them. So
yeah, exactly. And then somewhere in there they fixed all that by the time Trunks Saga got around, and that's when Chippy came. Chippy and I think Q got farmed from Lone Star Comics because they were the two best Pokemon players there, and they got brought in to answer, because they both started in customer service, answering the rules questions when people would call in to figure out how to play the game from the Saga rulebook.
Which everybody probably had to do at that time.
Back then there was just a phone number, like the Nintendo Power Hotline or whatever.
Yeah.
You called in the Score and you're like, I have a question about this card.
And Chippy answered, well, it works this way. It's removed from game. And
I'm sure having listened to that for like a year, he had plenty of ideas how to fix mechanics.
Well, right. So Mastery is, I had been playing Sensei and Saga. I quit in Frieza Saga out of just like, what is the point of this game? Every deck is doing the same thing, doing non-combat stuff. At Comic-Con, I remember seeing the Trunks Saga starters, and it was like, whoa, Piccolo level 1 is an energy for 6. Like, that's really strong relative to the other MPs. Then you see Vegeta, and he's like physical for 8 on level 2, energy for 7 on level 3. And it's like, okay, this is interesting. What's going on here? And then I saw the Masteries, and it's like, okay, finally there's a reason not to just put all the best cards in one deck. And so I started...
There's a reason to run a Tokawaza.
Well, yeah, exactly. And so that got me back into the game. And I remember reading tournament reports from Blanchard and Valdez around that time. I don't know how much you covered that in previous interviews, whatever, but, you know, Brian Blanchard won nationals. Valdez got second.
We didn't talk really much about any of that.
So, okay, well then he also got second, he got top 4 at the Worlds that we're about to talk about. But this, I think, was one of the best environments ever. Android Saga was building upon Trunks Saga of like, okay, it's a real game now. There's actual deck building decisions to make and stuff. And then Android Saga just added more powerful cards. There's a lot of interesting decks during that time. You had Akon earlier. Ake won that Worlds. So the top decks in that format, it's like Red Anger was really fast, but it wasn't only during the non-combat step because they finally errated. You can't use non-combat during non-combat sets. Sorry. Combat Ender blocks were changed to be played as an action. A lot of stuff was restricted, like all the stop alls, Nappa's physical resistance, Vegeta's stance, all that stuff. You could play 3 of those before. They made that all 1 per deck. So it's like much more interesting.
Trump's Energy Sphere too was a game changer to that.
Yeah, exactly. Changing halt to combat card so that you could Energy Sphere it. Like, because before it was physical combat. So if you get halted, the game is just like over basically.
I always forget that Psychic Halt actually never, like, it wasn't just banned out of the box.
Yeah, there was, okay, let's move on. Cell Saga, it was still legal in Cell Saga. Cell Saga, you had like different colors of 18 dominating stuff. Cell Games, it was still legal in Cell Games. Cell Games, you're talking about, Saiyan Saga was out for a long time. Cell Games was a really long environment. It was like 7 months or something, 8 months in between releases. But it had like 2 or 3 different major erratas. One of them, battle pausing, finally got restricted. One of them, Halt, finally did get banned. But Halt was legal all the way into Cell Games.
I always forget that.
Cell Games was also the start of people finally like mass adopting the combat card tutors. So like Krillin Concentration, Piccolo and Heroes Gather.
That was all. Tim Bateau was the first person I remember. He did the Namekian strike, like all the Namekian strikes, Krillin's Con, all that stuff in a deck.
Dave Fashbinder definitely had access to that early, and he was one of the pioneers of it. Brian Blanchard played it. I think maybe even borrowing the cards from Dave, like they were that rare at that point. But just speaking to Halt, that deck relied on combat card tutors. Piccolo and Heroes Gather, Krillin's Concentration. You were already going to run those cards anyways, and then Halt was a combat card too. So it's like, okay, kick on for halt you, Piccolo and Heroes Gather for strike and battle pausing, strike for an attack, battle pausing, strike for an attack, battle. Halt was ridiculous. That was one of the worst. Like, I like 1 per deck cards, I think, and we can get into that later talking about the PanZ part of the game and stuff. I think 1 per deck cards are a good thing, especially in this game engine. And another good thing is battling over them. How do you, some styles are better at searching it out faster. Some are better at removing it from you so you can't recur it. Some are better at recurring, denying, etc. But not Halt. Halt was just done. Like, it just needed to not exist. It wasn't interesting to fight over who resolved their Halt first or whatever.
Opponent. I mean, it was kind of just like time walking your opponent or something.
It's that's the best analogy for it, is time walking your opponent in a game where you do win in matter of turns. So
yeah.
And then just wrapping up where things move through that, I guess I sort of zoomed through those other ones. But World Game Saga was terrible.
It wasn't, I mean, other than the tap car.
Tap car.
Dark Ages, there.
Here's my issue with tap car. My tap car thesis. No, there's always stuff that slips through. We can attest to that. You cannot catch everything. But what was irksome as a player, from a player's perspective about tap car, was that it was clearly never even used once. Because if you used it even once, you would notice his power that levels you into level 2, like they chain. You get to use level 1 and level 2 that same combat when you level, which is obviously ridiculous. You drew like 8 cards or something from that. They errated that day 1. Oops, he doesn't get to use it when chaining. As in, they literally never even used him once to see that power worked that way to move through the stages like that.
Very powerful name, like Tap Car on the Move was a very powerful name card. Yep. He built into the drag. He was basically.
He's the best Dragon's Victory character for sure. Yeah.
Character. I mean.
Backlash. He is the best Backlash character.
Yeah, Backlash was a card I never enjoyed. That card.
Sensei's also came out in that set, and those ended up being, I guess, okay for the health of the long term. But if you remember Weskai.
One of them got rotted. I guess it was Weskai that got.
It was Weskai because all the other ones were irrelevant because Weskai just straight up was "Don't you just hate that" instead of hitting drills only. So, and then Bobby Saga was cool. It had the powerful cycle of Sensei deck only cards, which that ended up being a problem. Well, speaking of Sensei deck only, World Games, the only card that matters from it really, Goku's Blinding Strike, probably arguably the best attack ever made. Bobbity Saga, Black Pivot Kick, Black Front Punch, the Saiyan one, Saiyan Headshot, Red Sniping Shot, all those Sensei deck only cards, those were cool and stuff, but they kind of broke the color wheel. Like Black getting non-combat removal. What did Namekian get in that? No, they eventually got shield destructions on that.
Namekian got stuff, but I don't know if it was in that set or not, but there was like if your opponent declared a Namekian token, I guess that came in Fusion Saga maybe.
The tech ones, it's like they have to remove the bottom 8 cards of their deck or ridiculous crap like that. There's a Saiyan card in that if your opponent's black, they have to pay stages even to block. Mm-hmm. So you just keep them from even playing the game. Some of those are a little too powerful. Fusion Saga, Devastation Drill was in that, so Freestyle Beats was good. Kid Buu would probably have been by far like the most diverse, most interesting, best format ever. We play tested the hell out of that for 30 people, seriously, for however many months. That would have been the most amazing set ever. Yeah, and there were 0 tournaments for it. There was never an environment for it. It never mattered.
I will tell you about, when we were doing the retro stuff, one of the things I wanted to do was why we never allowed GT cards. Is I just want to play the game with Kid Buu Saga.
What if we had had a season of Kid Buu, right?
Kid Buu Saga. And the thing that we learned after, because we didn't start making virtual cards, I think, until after 2 years of retro. And it was at that point just to kind of thing it up. The Kid Buu personalities in that set are so way at the top of the power chart that they became very problematic. Very problematic as the game evolved, and people got a chance to play with that set for a long time. They realized once I get to level 2, I mean, I can hit in 12-15 just on basic stuff.
The one good thing, and this is by accident, not by design or whatever, but the one good thing about that environment, hypothetically, if Kid Buu played out like that, I'm assuming you're talking about Bojack, Supreme Weskai. She wasn't Kid Buu, but she never had a tournament era to shine like that. So those people, they don't have a level 4. So they do get teched. Roshi doesn't have a level 4 either. They do get teched really hard by 1 through 3 anger, which is that's really easy to do. You only need 10, 15 anger to win.
We ended up banning after 1 year. We banned Supreme Weskai because she was just not fun in really any format. And at that point,
I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, she was so.
And at that point, we were doing a lot of just print the cards off the internet. Don't buy them. It makes no sense. We're all here to just.
Since you had changed what the original text of them was and stuff.
Yeah, so a lot of people are just making their own versions of cards and not putting card numbers on there. So it was odd even was just such an odd thing to do, and it's weird to see Magic actually doing odd even cards these days. It just I have flashbacks about Supreme Weskai, but she was kind of one of those things that was well, I guess you have a 50% chance of doing it. Broly 2% was a little bit like that too, where you can get Earth 3, Earth 5 in the same non-combat phase.
He gets to jump you.
And then if you just have a kick, like Kid Buu, I mean, he would go from 1 to 2 really quick. And then once he got to 2, it was just like bam, 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 bam. And then
And
one of his sets like shut off endurance too, like his level 3 or something shuts down endurance.
I'm just remembering saying handstand as you're saying that too, which you gained an anger for each Dragon Ball you had.
Yeah,
Kid Buu had a lot of same beef. I don't know if the like Turbo Brawlies would play that. They probably did, but that was another really cool card.
yeah, because I like during a lot of those tournaments when we were doing retro stuff, I played like a 1 through 5 Broly deck with 7 Dragon Balls, only block being time and the Omni blocker that tutors or whatever. For
Stay Embrace, and it gets Truce card.
Yeah, and it gets Truce card, and then with Standing Gut Kick, you get
yeah, the Dragon Ball search, right?
Gut Kick into Dragon Ball 3, you know, and if you get another, you know, Gut Kick into 5, you would just go nuts. And I would win by anger a fair amount before I killed people because people were running a lot of endurance. But like, if you got a beef off, or and then there's even the one that went back to the bottom of your deck.
Saiyan Acute Rapid Slam.
Yeah.
It would put all of your Saiyan cards back to the bottom, even if they're removed from game. So like you could get beef back. And
so just run.
You're reminding me of, I played a red Brawly deck that was supposed to win by anger. This was in GT, but still, it was supposed to win by anger. But you just accidentally killed them, like while you're leveling up. So in the same way that you're talking about, you're trying to be a beatdown deck and you just accidentally won by anger sometimes because that's what Brawly did. Like, and you could ball out. Like if they randomly decked you almost first turn or something, you could just drop the balls and still win. So.
And then like occasionally I'd run the Namek balls in that deck because they're kind of techy.
Oh yeah, the alt Namek balls are really powerful.
Yeah.
Same Brawly.
But that environment, like we played that environment pretty much for retro for 2 years, and it was awesome. That was kind of like our pitch. Like, let's play the thing that we all wanted to play and never got a chance to play.
So for anybody still interested in Kid Buu Saga, just like that time capsule format, I've always wondered to myself, is Majin Vegeta Gatefold high tech playable in the Kid Buu environment? And I would say yes. His level 1 stops a physical and looks at your top 3 for a Majin card and puts it in your hand. There's a decent amount of Majin cards by then. So he's already kind of like a +2 as an MP. He's got a block and he generates a card from it. If you're blue CS, you have like an energy beatdown package going. Anyways, to your point, I'm sure you could have played that for more than 2 years and continue. I'm sure people could still play it now.
Yeah, I mean, basically what happened, like, because we would only do like 10 virtual cards a year, and they were more fan, like we made one real like mistake, and it got real powerful. We did a Baba personality that was basically Rukuya Kai or whatever from Yu Hakusho.
Some sort of passive mill or something.
Yeah, and that turned out to be kind of a problem. So we ended up having to change that. But for the most part, it was just very minor tweaks to what was the Kid Buu environment, just kind of throwing in stuff that people wanted. And it still was always different for the most part. It took, and there are a lot of cards in the game. And I mean, like Freestyle Vegeta got really good towards the end of that because there was the Vegeta league cards. I think by the time we had done the 5th, because we did more retro championships than they ever did like ScoreZ championships. We did like 5 or 6 of those things. So we played basically like variations of the Kid Buu thing for 6 years. And Vegeta got really good because I guess there were league cards like Cushion Punch and things like that turned out to be very good. That it just took people like 6 years to kind of learn those decks and things like that.
Piccolo always seemed like he would be good in Kid Buu freestyle as well, because once you're ready to do the kill turn, you just go get multiform with mastery and blow them away with Devastation Drill or whatever.
Freestyle decks got reasonably good. And I think a lot of people just really enjoyed freestyle. Like Buu was one that people always mess with. What was the other stuff that people just tinkered around with all types of words. Vegeta freestyle is always like everybody's favorite Vegeta deck. Trunks freestyle also is very popular. People really like that deck too.
Well, I think you were asking, before I went into a little of the history stuff, I think you're asking favorite decks that I might have played or something. So I'm trying to think of how far I ever got with this deck. Tim probably got much farther with me. So even though I never actually won anything with this deck, I think my favorite deck was Freestyle Goku Dragon Ball. Because Goku's Dragon Ball Quest is a very unique card. It is, so there's an example. It's maybe a little bit too powerful, but there's an example of a 1 per deck card that is not removed from game after use, and the entire point of it is how well do you manage, searching it out, recurring it, stopping your opponent from disrupting you, from removing it from your discard pile or using it, whatever. So that was the highly interactive deck, which Dragon Ball decks up to that point had traditionally not been. You try to just stop everything from happening. That deck was very interactive. It was entering combat with Heroic Drill, confrontation, and setting up its combos and stuff. So that's probably my favorite deck. Just you talking about freestyle brought that up to me. And I actually was curious about this. I remember playing against you more in GT just because that's when we're doing playtesting more.
Yeah.
What did you mostly play in Z? What did you like to use in Z?
Oh, so I mean, if I was playing in one of the big tournaments, it was a much different story than when I was playing locally. So locally, I played just like a lot of Android 20 stuff. Like I played a lot of black Android 20. It was essentially like the Fanatics black Android 18 deck.
But it was 20 instead.
But it was 20. It ran essentially the same way. I really love that deck.
What was his MP power? Like, were you the Android Saga one? The one that dropped and searched?
No. I was the energy attack doing +1 for every Android in play.
Oh, okay. Then my cousin used that too. Okay.
That got really big. He was able to do quite a bit of damage. So I played that a lot. And then like I played a lot of just Roshi Dragon Ball for a while. Also, and then I tinkered around with stuff. I remember everybody in my locals hated me because I would play like a Cyberman anger deck all the time. And I would randomly win all the time because I'd be like, y'all need to run level 5 personalities with these things. And then when it came to the big events like the regionals and the worlds, I played more of the metagame stuff, that's that kind of old Magic player coming in like stuff. Occasionally I try to do like a meta call. And a few times it worked out really well. My favorite tournament that I played in was the Akon Regional, and I ran Goldo as my MP. And another guy in my locals was like, I'm going to play whatever deck you're playing because you're usually right on the money. And the whole idea was everybody at that time frame was Namekian. They were like Piccolo.
Yeah.
And South Kai for Android 14 because 14 had just come out, and that was like the format. And
he blocked you from getting stunned. So.
Yeah, and I was like, I need to be able to go and get 14 before my opponent.
So you wanted an MP with a lower power level.
Yeah, go Goldo. And they allowed Android 14 to be the guy to do all the power. So I was like, he's in like an incredibly high power bracket. I'm going to play black. And then I would just do crazy, like I would kill, the deck was actually super efficient, and I could, because of his power, a lot of people, especially those Namekian decks, you just enter combat first turn, 14.
And it doesn't matter what your hand is because it's just getting discarded to 14's power anyway. If it's not relevant.
And then you Goldo, get it back.
Hit him again.
And they ruled that you could use Android 14's power as the base power and then pay all your stages on Black Physical Focus on your MP. What? Yeah. So I can remember like I went all the way undefeated through, and then the other guy went, I guess, 8-1 or 7-1 with it, and we got to top 16, and I played in the Namekian deck, and I decked him on the first turn of the game. Like it was just one of those hands that just went nuts. So, but it was like I had Z Warriors Gather and like 2 other cards. So I was like, I'll play Z Warriors Gather, I'll enter combat, I'll Z Warriors Gather, get my 7 allies out. One of those things was Black Physical Focus in my hand. It was like, I'll do Android 14, Black Physical Focus all the way down.
They're at 0 now.
They're at 0. And my allies were just the androids. They were all the androids. And so you had 13 and 14, the one that you could use as power twice. And they were basically all incredibly high power brackets at the time. And then you'd just be like Android 20, Android 17. So it was like hitting for 7 attacks that all did at least 10 damage. And the guy just looked at me and he was like, okay.
That's the game, I guess. Like.
And I just crushed him with like basically a 2-card hand that turned into like 12 attacks. And then Karma got me because I played against a guy who was playing Cosmic Backlash, and he just entered the game first turn with a Backlash. And I was like, draw my 3, draw my 5. Okay.
That's game. Yeah.
And the only reason he got to go first is because he was playing Bardock.
Oh, that was the famous Bardock Backlash, huh? If that guy's out there watching, we wondered about that deck for years. Right, yeah. Kunk played him too at that same event, I think.
Yeah, I remember Chippy was sitting there watching my match because he was super interested in my deck, and he just looked at that Bardock and then me, and I was like, you guys are real good at making interactive game design here. So years later, that was a running joke about that. And then that guy who backlashed me in that top 4, he actually played Inuyasha for a long time, and he would show up with backlashes all the time at the regionals and want me to sign them. Because I remember like the first week I was an official Score employee and they let me sit in a CRD meeting. I was like, can we please ban Cosmic Backlash? At that point, it was the GT rules and it was kind of stupid in GT rules.
I remember, right, it was like what, Kid Buu playtesting when it became Tough Enough only, maybe, or that was around Fusion, maybe.
Well,
yeah, bad card.
It was tough. I think it was Tough Enough only going. No, it wasn't Tough Enough only going into that Worlds because I played Backlash in Tough Enough format, and then Namekian and Piccolo in the other half of that tournament.
It's very confusing thinking back on that, the timeline of Backlash, because everybody, like almost everybody, did play Backlash in that Tough Enough because it was broken and it was really good and it had been refined at that point. And then you also notice, hey, nobody played Backlash in Standard for that event at Worlds, just the Tough Enough. It must have been Tough Enough. No, it was legal. Just nobody decided, my deck that's dominating Tough Enough, it's probably good enough for Standard too. No one brought the Backlash in.
I think it was bad against ball decks just because you had to deal with the blue mastery. And there was no ball decks in Tough Enough.
True, but it was a lot harder for Backlash versus ball, I think, before Northkai. Once they got Northkai for blue CS, it was like it's not as difficult. Like maybe you're not perfect backlashing them, but ball decks maybe didn't run that many absolute blocks in the first place. It might have been like time, maybe stop balls. So if you did stop blue mastery, they're kind of screwed.
Yeah, I just remember the ball decks were the reason I didn't go Backlash through the whole thing, because I think like some of the ball, at least in my local guys, the guys we play with. Like
they had tuned it against Backlash.
They had like the defense drills and stuff in there. So you have
interesting.
Yeah, and then a lot of the people, at least in my thing, they would run. Remember what was it, Walter, the guy who won the world championship with Orange?
Walter Cower.
Yeah, he won Orange with Orange 18, and he ran like all the Dende balls and stuff. Like that kind of ball deck was also very popular amongst my play group at the time too. Mm-hmm. And because of the one like orange drill that said you could stop a physical or whatever, and then they had at that point the orange mastery was out that was putting the drills into play. You could really shield up pretty well with that. I guess it was the Boo Saga Orange Mastery. Yeah,
the worst mastery in the old game, in my opinion.
Also scared me away from Backlash a lot because that was what my brother played. And I honestly, like, coming from having played a lot of Magic stuff at that point, do I want to play this deck?
It might just scoop to someone getting the block drill.
8 rounds, and then once I get out of Tough Enough, have to get into the real grindy, the second half of the day. Like, do I want to mentally lost myself going into rounds like 7 or 8? If I'm on the bubble and I have to win, do I need to do something like that? And my philosophy in Magic in those big events was run whatever I was the most comfortable with, whatever I thought percentage-wise would get me to day 2 that wasn't going to mentally exhaust me.
That's a good strategy. That's especially in a lot of Z events, the top cut was right after Swiss. Mm-hmm. So you might be playing till midnight if you're finishing.
Yeah, that was part of the reasons too. Well, like I went into that Goldo deck that one time because I knew at least that was an anime convention that was local to us. We partied a lot during that, so I knew like I also just wanted a deck that was going to win or lose in 3 turns, so I would have plenty of time to recoup. Luckily, I won almost every game in 3 turns, so it was just like, okay, I have 30 minutes to go chill before the next round starts instead of grinding to the last minute and immediately having to go back to a match and immediately going back to a match, which is what I thought all those Namekian decks at the time. Like you would sit there and wait for your kill turn, and then a Namekian mirror match was not always a pleasant thing to have to sit through.
That's true. I'm trying to think of how many times I played Namekian at regionals. Either way, I think the first time it wasn't like as pervasive, but the second time, everybody, like you're saying, was South Kai from 14, and those mirror matches were brutal and a little luck based, like, oh, who gets 14 first and that stuff. So I always made a point to play North Kai in Namekian for the mirror because it's brutal on the turns you're turning it off. And there are other little edges you could get. You could play 4 Piccolo Neros together, which a lot of people didn't do in some things. Sean famously played Piccolo's Fist Block in his Namekian, which like that's a hard tech call that turns off all combat cards.
I remember yeah.
So we could talk all day about old DBZ decks and getting into the weeds about it too, of specific builds and stuff like that. I'm thinking of a regional right now that I play China. Anyway, I don't know if you wanted to move on from old Z, if you wanted more Panini Z.
Well, let's just since I don't know if you follow kind of the world of the online collectability these days, but this has come up a lot, and a lot of people, this is always something everybody wants to talk about, is GT is, and this is actually something that Chippy and I, since Chippy was most of the mind behind GT is the set that for the most part is lost to time, forgotten by all the players, but it is beloved by collectors. I don't know if you've seen like the frenzy around getting those, because that was when we were doing all the multiple foil patterns and stuff. Especially that set 8 did, Lost Episodes. Like some of the values on those cards are astronomical. Like you're seeing thousands of dollars for some of those cards.
If just on that topic, collectibles in general seem to be going crazy right now.
Yeah. Sports card market, the graded comics, graded Power 9, all that stuff is just nuts.
And then so when you factor in, we're talking about a really scarce thing. Like I'd love to know the actual print numbers on Lost Episodes. It's got to be.
I want to say it was like 80 to 120 cases. It was very low. It was very low.
So yeah, that's the summer magic of GT basically. There's not a lot of it. And if people are going to collect anything at this, juncture in time, anything that's rare,
well, and they grade
see why that would be popular.
And people buy it as like an investment. Like I had one guy contact me looking for it, and this is common amongst all the collectibles. He was going through a divorce, and he
wanted his cash into assets or something.
Something that his wife wouldn't have any interest in looking at.
Or even know, I guess, that much money was in one card. Sure.
Yeah. And that's a very common thing I see a lot all the time.
Well, not to get off the DBZ retrospective topic, but just on collectibles, that's got to be a huge component of it, right? People wanting to put cash money into pieces of paper you can carry around, cardboard, and if you need to, okay, Black Lotus, $10,000 or whatever, sell it on the spot.
It used to be $10,000. It's significantly higher than that nowadays. Yeah. There was one that was like a 9.8 grade that went like close to $1 million, I think, because now they're being sold at like heritage auctions.
Right. The authentication really matters. Well, when you're talking about old Magic stuff, this is getting on 30 years old now. Alpha rares, there's less than 1,100.
Yeah, well,
each one.
I don't know if you know a little bit like the guys when crypto became a big thing. Those 2 crypto guys who made all that money on crypto.
Did they buy into Magic?
They ran the numbers and were like, this is like almost 30 years old. There's a finite amount of them. Let's go in and do massive buyouts. So they bought out like all the dual lands.
It worked.
Alpha dual lands are like $300 to $500 and stuff.
Oh, $3,000 to $5,000 now for Alpha duels. Like. Yeah. I was looking at a beat up one the other day that was $4,000. So
yeah, it's pretty wild. But I mean, I have had this conversation with a couple of guys a couple months ago, and I was like, that early score stuff. I mean, that's 20 years old.
I've noticed you were talking about Lost Episodes being collectible, just with the bump for everything in general. But I have noticed a renewed interest in original DBZ cards. So I think off camera, you and I were talking about Yu earlier. There's renewed interest in collecting for that.
Well, one of the things too that like before the kind of like the gamer fans were in it, one of the things I noticed, because I deal in the figure arts figures, the high end ones. So I got really involved in that collectors community, and those guys, I just assumed they were all kind of like action figure collectors or something, but no, most of those people that collect those high end Dragon Ball figures, they collect, their thing is Dragon Ball stuff. So
any merchandise related to it.
Yeah, so the score cards are like some of the old, like the Goku level, Super Saiyan level 3 stuff. Those like Vegeta level 5 from Cell Saga. Those are like kind of like holy grail cards in the DBZ collecting world as a whole. So like I'll be looking at somebody's like photos, people post their collections of their figures and stuff, and they'll be like, here's my super rare figure, and then they have one of those plaques on the wall, and it's a bunch of the old score cards.
Having never played the game or been interested in that. Interesting.
Yeah, and then the Anime Mayhem cards are the same way. And then the trading cards before, like the late 90s trading cards.
Card-ass.
Yep. Card-ass stuff is the same thing. Like people are really going after their way to find those. And what happens is you find the guy who only needs like 2 cards. And he's like, I just need whatever uncommon and this random rare. I mean, I'll pay you $100 if you have it. And the next thing you know, suddenly there's like a new bar set on the price of something based on this guy's kind of need to complete a set.
And then stuff starts happening, like maybe you're mildly nostalgic for that or whatever, and you thought in the back of your head, if I wanted to, I could pick that stuff up someday. And then you see the prices spiking, and then other people go, well, I better pick up this old Pokemon card or this old Magic card I've always wanted or whatever. And then the price keeps going up.
Yeah,
so
the FOMO kicks in, and next thing you know, you're sitting on 10 Charizard graded 0.9s, and you're like, why do I have all these?
Yeah, exactly. The one good thing I would say about that, I guess, and this is getting slightly off topic, but generally with collectibles, unless you're going like really risky, the money doesn't go away at least. So if you make some bad purchases, you can sell those collectibles. That'll still be there. It might even increase in value in the meantime. But just the frenzy around DBZ cards, especially in general, lost episodes, like you're saying, and it's definitely interesting to watch because a lot of those cards, to you especially, but like to us is, you know, you win boxes of them, you get boxes of them as a playtest or whatever. A lot of the stuff now that sells for like 500, 600, but it's like we maybe had stacks of those and we're tossing them as a joke or giving them away, or it's like, what are these going to be worth someday? And you toss them when you move.
I didn't realize, but like the Giru League sets that came out of GT were never released. They never actually sent any of them out or produced any of them. And I had, like, when I left Score, I took my sleeve of Inuyasha playtesting decks home. And I was, you know, a couple of years later, I was like, I'm going to sell a few of these GT cards because people always were asking for GT cards.
Yeah.
And it was usually people looking for the rare foil patterns because it was so hard to get those ones. And at that point, they'd be like, I'll give you $5 for this or whatever. So I randomly like posted a card that had Giru on it I was using an Inuyasha playtesting deck. And somebody like texted me and they were like, yo, what is this card? Was listed on the GT website.
Never released. And you had like a whole deck back with them, basically.
Well, it turned out the Giru League never got released. And I guess they had just, like, I just used a sleeve of them to proxy decks for years at Score. And so I sold those to a couple of people, and I put together like 7 full sets out of what was in the playtesting decks and sold all 7 of those sets. And it was crazy what they were going for. And I haven't seen any of those cards sell since then. And this was 10 years ago. And at that time, I was like, I can't believe people are going to offer like 5-digit numbers and stuff for some of these things.
Now it might have been a great investment by them with the way things are going.
To my knowledge, none of those things ever came out. Like, are you familiar with like the F5 and F6 promos?
I don't know much about the GT promos other than
these were
rare.
These were Score promos from Z. They were the ones.
Wait a minute. There's a Dragon Ball Z card, Z back with Giru on it.
No.
Oh, okay, so it's a GT set still. Okay.
No. These actually were printed in like Fusion Saga or something.
What?
And there's 2 of them that we're also using as like playtesting proxies. And I put one up online, and people were like, "We've never been able to pull this card." And I was like, "Well, no, I'm positive that card got released." And they were one of those ones where it was a base foil, a silver foil, and a gold foil. And I went and pulled them all out. I kind of sold them all at the time, but now it's like I don't know if you go onto the retro page all the time or not still, but Fashbinder was talking about like, this is the one card I wish I had that I never had. It was one of those cards. And
is it like energy surfing drill or is it that drill with Boo that has like the stuff exploding around him?
Yeah. So like I did a little bit of research, and what happened with those cards were, at this point, DVDs were like the predominant media in the world, and that promo line went into VHS tapes. And
so it was released technically, just nobody ever bought it.
Yeah. So what happened was that card was the rare chase promo. So it was also like maybe like 1 in every 20 videos. And then the gold foil one was probably 1 in every 100, 150 videos. And at that point, I'm fairly positive those went into mass. No one bought them. They got clearanced out, sent to like half price books, and then mostly all destroyed.
Yeah.
So
that makes perfect sense because Half Nelson, the Celestial Battleground, all those other things were in DVDs. So the foil pattern matches up and stuff.
Yeah, and
Interesting.
So I see it on the DBZ collect like the non-card game stuff. People collect those little VHS tapes. Like they're kind of somewhat fanatic about it. It's like a nostalgia thing because you can put them all together on a shelf and they make
the panorama. Yeah.
People want that in their collection, but people go around and they buy the ones with the cards in them, specifically looking for like the chase cards, and they go through like flea markets and stuff, and anytime they see one that has one of the old cards in it, because I guarantee you're only going to pay like $1 or $2 from anybody for that VHS tape.
Right.
And pretty much any cards you pull out of there, I guarantee you can sell for $5. So you're usually in the money.
I had no idea that they put them in VHS tapes. So I would, now that I know that, I'll check myself if I ever come across any.
Yeah, so that's the only, because I talked to some people at Funimation about it, and that's kind of like, yeah, they all went into VHS tapes. They really didn't go into, like, not all of them went into the DVDs and stuff. And I was like,
that makes sense.
Yeah, because they were the F promos, I believe, because they were like Funimation promo.
Right, Funimation.
Okay. So I guess we might as well let's go into PanZ. So what was it like when you heard that the game was coming back? What were you?
Well, I'm trying to think of the timeline leading up to, because it was a while of knowing that it was like in the motion. I don't remember when you signed your NDA for working on the new one.
Yeah, so Ake and I talked to Ake about it.
At like a Comic-Con.
Yeah, I want to say maybe even, I know at least one Comic-Con had passed, but possibly two had passed.
I think it was two in between first talking about it and then actually coming out.
And at the time, he was just kind of like, it was a kind of a brainchild of Carl Braun. And I had talked to Carl at a convention earlier in the year, and he was always asking me about the retro stuff. And the idea at the time when we talked about it was the 10-year anniversary was coming up of the game. And let's do a commemorative box set, because like the game in the box idea was the hot thing in the card game world at that point. So I just didn't think anything else of it, and I was just like, so eventually this box is going to come up with like 300 cards in it. That's just going to be like a bunch, all the iconic cards from the game reprinted. And then, I guess a year and a half probably later, Funimation contacted me about working on special features for a Blu-ray about the original card game, and they had they wanted me to set some stuff up, but they were like, we're going to do some of this thing with Panini, and I just assumed it was about the actual like box set thing. So I got like Brian involved, and we like scripted some matches and recorded them and stuff, and they did like a little history on this Blu-ray thing. But it was there that they had like a bunch of PR reps from Panini there, and they were like, oh, it's going to be starter, booster, and all this stuff. And I was like, that's not what we talked about. And he was like, yeah, we haven't started developing it yet, but we started like soliciting to distributors, and they're like, they want the actual game back. And I was like, oh, okay. And then it was short. I think Comic-Con came up right after that. And that's when we like the actual development cycle started and stuff on that.
When it was first introduced to me, it was going to be 95% straight reprints with like maybe a few cards tweaked out of the old, stuff. And then it evolved into what it became. That's why you can see in the first set, there is like a huge attempt to have, like, I think the Saiyan deck had a lot of, the Saiyan starter deck had at one point almost all reprints. Like it was, I think Joey made that, and I think it was almost all reprints. And then stuff that we tried to do as reprints that accidentally had endurance on it. It's like, oops, it's not really a reprint. You can't use it. And then it started getting really technical, like, okay, energy attack in the old game doesn't ever say its cost because it's assumed base 2 stages. And then it was just decided, it's too confusing. So those don't actually count. The compatibility list came down to like 10 reprint, 10 original cards you can use. But that's because the game started it was originally going to be that.
Yeah, and I think at that point too, like there's a lot of old players, but there's still like a lot of new players. And it made sense, like if this thing's going to have legs, you just kind of, there needs to be a little bit more separation there.
For sure.
Oh, yeah. So were you surprised by how successful the game was when it came back? Like that first Comic-Con when we posted like all the previews that were just the printed off cards online, and that was the first time it was publicly known. I mean, it just crashed it crushed everything that we had going on at the time.
And right, just noting I remember what you're talking about. That was Gen Con, where Ake sent you some of the early preview sheets.
We at Comic-Con, they didn't have the demo decks yet, but they had printed out like
just
so. And then the Gen Con is when he sent the demo decks up there, and we just put them on the table at the retro tournament, and then everybody started playing it, and people were super into it. And I was like, this thing's gonna work, man.
Yeah. Yes. I wasn't surprised by the success, I guess, because it should have been as successful as it was, if not more. You know, it's Dragon Ball Z. So as long as it was a very eccentric game engine, so it makes sense that it wasn't like gonna have mass appeal in that sense. But
also, the Dragon Ball Super was like starting to come out at the time. It was
right, like Beerus and all that. We got to do the promo with that.
There's a good storm of like just media attention on Dragon Ball.
Exactly.
And
Kai had been not that long before, maybe 2 years before we started.
Yeah, I remember the movies, like Battle of Gods and stuff. I mean, like they were in the movie theaters and stuff. But I can remember like the first couple of sets amongst my play group, it was a lot of like guy with his son.
New fan.
And they would play who used to play the old games, now playing with the new game. And then that slowly kind of transitioned into the people who were playing for nostalgia. They were just still playing at home. They weren't really going into the tournament scene. And then you started to see like more players coming in. I saw a lot of people who came from like the raw deal world because there's a lot of similarities between Z and
sure. Right. The attack block.
There was a substitute that was kind of like a substitute to them for that type of game that really had not existed since that mid 2000s era when Raw Deal and Z both went away.
I might be mistaken about this, but as far as I know, up to I think 2017, you're talking about the popularity of the game and everything. The DBZ event at Gen Con was the largest Gen Con event in 2015, and then in 2016.
It was by far the largest event of anything that was not in production. Like you couldn't, like Magic was there, obviously. So those are the large events. But as far as like what they would consider at that point, like the legacy games, they had like a category for it. Like
right. So you're talking about during Retro, right? Yeah. So even then it had a convention presence. And I was just speaking to your point about the popularity of when Panini brought it back and stuff. The Panini Gen Con tournaments were the biggest tournaments, like even of the big games that year. But part of that was Gen Con not wanting people to run large tournaments and do smaller pods instead, and we fought for that. But up until Star Wars Destiny had 500 or whatever the year after our last Gen Con.
Yeah.
It was very popular. There were large tournaments. We were worried for the 2016, I think it was, that we're going to have to turn people away. We're going to have to cap it at 256 was the most space they would give us.
Yeah, a lot of that was it was an open tournament. Anybody could sign up. And there wasn't there wasn't like the Pro Tour circuit.
Right.
At that point, I guess, until you got to the Kai Invitationals, you didn't have that next level of qualification to participate in that big world tournament. Yeah. Oh, okay. Let's just talk a little bit more about PanZ real quick. If things had worked out differently with the licensing issues and stuff like that, are there things that you wish, as if the games are still in production, like design ideas you could have explored? Ake and I talked about, I don't know if you played any of the ReZ game that came out. The
Invitational.
The one thing that I really liked from that game was the refocusing mechanic. I thought it was very indicative of the show and was something that happened in the show a lot. That is something that might have, potentially could have made it into PanZ as a mechanic.
The beam struggle.
Yeah. So is there anything like that you would have liked to have been able to explore into the game?
So, well, for one, Set 7 itself, just the design of Set 7 it was supposed to be the start of like a new block, kind of like, if you remember, the Masteries got frozen for the first time at that point. And there had been a lot of discussion about rotation, and in a game like DBZ where every single individual card in like a 300 card set needs to have some functional purpose because there's no draft or whatever, how do you avoid power creep without rotation? And we worked really hard around that, and you can always use the same MPs and stuff. So Set 7 was supposed to be the start of like kind of a new block and everything. And then obviously the rug got pulled out from under us. So I would say that yes, there were a lot of long-term things being set in motion with what we had planned for set 7. As far as you just getting back to mechanics, though, in a perfect world where from the beginning we had modified the base engine even more. I mean, you can't change it that much. That's why it was coming back in the first place, right? But
I think that was why it was as successful as it was, that it didn't deviate.
It was so unique.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean yes, the reprint adhering to that uniqueness. Yeah. But one thing that Sean and I had talked about a lot was no endurance, and it's funny that you brought up raw deal earlier, but basically raw deal style blocking. So if you're getting milled for damage from an attack, if you discard a block of that type of attack, you stop taking damage at that point. And what I thought was interesting about that was like, you only get 3 random cards every turn. So even if you built a deck that was 50% blocks, it's not statistically likely, but you could be like the block deck and still lose to someone's face aggro beatdown. And it's like, well, why am I even the block deck if I can't even stop a deck? Whereas if it's getting knocked out of your deck and it stopped it there, it's more rewarding. Oh, okay, you built a more defensive deck, you're getting more stops. It probably would have evened out to be like endurance timing wise.
Yeah.
But that is something I would have liked to see implemented. As far as doing that as a mechanic later on, I don't know that we could have done that. Maybe as an MP power, somebody's power worked that way.
Yeah. So do you keep up with any of the fan created stuff? Because kind of like how we did with retro, with the fan stuff, the PanZ stuff that they've done, and now they refer to it as FanZ. They've kind of taken it to the next level, and that version of the game has a very enduring legacy amongst that player base. Have you looked at some of the things they've done with like the traits and stuff like that?
I know that of the existence of the traits, nothing specific of like the card effects or anything, but yes, I know they've gone that direction and stuff. And then also just the card, like art design and everything, they look like real cards. Like they look like as if they had been made by Panini. So that's cool to have the congruency between them.
Yeah, and one of the neat things about that community, which is something I really enjoyed about retro, was they kind of adopt like, as long as you don't tinker with like the name and the card effect, go ahead and make your own proxies and stuff like that. And that
alternate art and stuff.
Yeah. That had disappeared, at least from our retro community, during the PanZ and production era, because it was so dominated by that. But it's nice to see that kind of like artistic expression and stuff coming about. I don't know if you've seen the guys now that they're putting like the animated GIFs.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, like the Hearthstone style.
That's so cool. So like we have some previews that we're going to do for one of the virtual sets, and they're all like animated cards, and they look awesome.
That sounds really cool.
That is super cool. And
maybe one day we'll see an actual app like that, like an actual game where you're playing and the card has a little animation.
Yeah, I don't know if you play Magic Arena, but they do a lot of that animation in there, like the Planeswalkers, like any mythic rare card in Magic Arena has an animation and stuff when you cast it.
A unique one.
Yeah, and it's pretty
cool.
Yeah. So.
That would apply so well to DBZ.
Like
characters calling out their attack or whatever when you play.
Did you check out the super game at all?
A little. I'm aware of it. Yeah, haven't followed it like super closely. I know they have a lot of sets. They're on the 12th or 13th set, right?
They're pretty popular. I played it for 3 sets because everybody I played PanZ with in San Antonio, not so much in Dallas, almost everybody in Dallas never didn't move on to super, but everybody in San Antonio, they immediately jumped on super. And mechanically, I thought it was pretty solid. It was very indicative of like almost like a mid 2000s, like it's a combination of like Yu-Gi-Oh and Versus to me. And they went more into the Yu-Gi-Oh side of things as the game went on, and less on the Versus side of things. So I dropped out after 3 sets just because it was not the style of game I enjoyed playing compared to the more cerebral kind of grindy game that the original Z could be. But I mean, the card art, I still think those cards look amazing. Like I would have loved to be able to do anything with that card art in any form of any time I was ever working on the Z property.
Oh, right. Like for just however things worked out, we're generally bound by screenshots, and these people are using full style guide assets, but they're also like they can commission original art in certain cases, and yeah, we can do anything like that.
No, even Score, they commissioned one card at Score was a commissioned piece of art.
I'd love to know, what is that?
Do you know what it was?
Okay. No, I have no idea.
It is the promo that came in the first Shonen Jump.
Oh, the Goku that's looking straight forward towards you. How interesting.
they commissioned that piece of art, and I want to say it was like $50,000.
I believe it. They probably gave a list of artists that were allowed to draw Goku in licensed form, and they had to pick one of them.
Yeah, I don't know the specifics, but I know when I got there, I asked about that because there was just a lot of promotion that went into the launching of Shonen Jump in America.
Oh yeah,
They brought over Akira Toriyama, all this stuff, and that was the only time they were allowed to commission art for a card.
There's a lot of interesting factoids being dropped on this. I had no idea about that. I had no idea about Jim Ward's background. So,
yeah,
interesting stuff.
Over the years, I've accrued quite a knowledge of some of this stuff.
Oh, right. So, like we were talking about off camera, at some point for the stream, you've got to show people the original. I wouldn't even call them prototype cards. They're like, the alpha playtest cards of Saiyan Saga, including Brown style. Brown lifting drill, Brown everything.
I wrote an article about the Brown style. So some people know about that, but
Brown style article.
It's just so bizarre. Like, just I guess we were talking earlier. It just trips me out that they're on like pieces of plastic and somebody cut paper out and glued it onto the plastic. Like they didn't. Like they may. I don't know. Depending on who was playtesting it, they may not have had a concept of like you could buy sleeves.
Yeah, right. They probably didn't know.
Yeah. So, because I honestly don't know how the first, I've never gotten an answer of how Saiyan Saga was ever playtested. I know
it can't have been.
I don't think, but the proxies exist. I see them. There at one point was a.
That's true. That's true. Maybe to play against himself or his.
I don't know. I don't know. I'll have to look at a Saiyan Saga rulebook, but I don't know if playtesters are credited in that or not.
That's a good question, actually. Let me look at that real quick. If I could even find a Saiyan Saga rulebook.
I bet there's one on Retro, actually.
Let's see.
I bet there is a rulebook on Retro. I know we have the Buu Saga one.
Media, maybe.
Oh, we only have the Buu Saga rulebook on Retro. We don't have the Saiyan Saga rulebook.
Well, that's something I'll have to look into later because you're right. They would be credited in that, and I bet you there aren't any. It's just special thanks to himself for playing mirror matches.
I bet he just like ran a Dragon Ball D&D campaign, and they just took pieces of that onto the cards. You look at card effects, and it's like the spirit of the earth heals you.
Piccolo slashes you for 5 life cards.
It's very indicative of like role-playing language. And even in the rules, the rule book is somewhat written like that. Like they talk about like don't actually be physically violent.
Yes,
to your opponent.
There are multiplayer rules in the Saiyan Saga rulebook, which I don't know if anyone has actually ever done. Well, actually, we did that with our friends once and had no idea what was going on based on the rules. That included the stop picking on me rule. You can't declare combat on someone twice in a row in a multiplayer game. Saiyan Saga also has some really weird Tokiwaza chart where if you compare them, it's supposed to be like if I declared red and you declared black or something, your attacks are -2 stages. Or it's just like a generic damage modifier. So there is a lot of role play stuff going on.
Like a attributes chart.
Yeah. The cosmic orange style is at odds with black manipulation or whatever is what the rulebook says.
I forgot about all that. I mean, I haven't looked at a Saiyan Saga rulebook in a long time, but I forgot about
That's good stuff, yeah.
Wow. I wonder who wrote that rulebook. I don't think
it's got to be him. I
don't think that was a Will Harper rulebook. I don't think he came on until Trunks Saga to actually like create a editing style guide. Like this is the format of the cards.
Of Lord Slug getting huge.
Lord Slug.
And all of the other How cold is an overkill? 7 life cards below 0. All his little insert discs.
Yeah. It was a different era of card games. So, all right. Well, are you playing any other card games currently? You keep up with Magic or anything like that?
I play a lot of card games, but they're all static formats. So I do play Magic, but I play like old school, if you're familiar with that. There's a Yu-Gi-Oh format called GOAT format. It's April 2005, I think.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the GOAT format.
We play, I've noticed retro Pokemon is like there's certain formats that are popular, 09 or 010. We play like super retro, base, jungle, fossil, rocket. That's it. So like the first four. But yeah, when it's like, you know, people are into old electronics now, cassette tapes or whatever.
Yeah.
So you could get that for like $5, some cassette player. Well, maybe not because the collectibles bump, but it's like, just because that's $5 now, it could have been $1,000 cassette recorder when it came out, as in it's still a high piece of quality. So all these old games, all these dead games that don't have sets coming out and stuff, you have the ability to look at all different eras and go, what's the best one? What was the most interesting one? What had the most diverse decks? Cool, we're going to play that. Like, we'll play up to that point. And so just another way to get value out of your old cards. And I have a lot of old cards that I, you know, so that's how we did, instead of, oh, I'm going to buy do you want to draft the newest Magic set? Do you want to play Arena, like you were saying? Do you want to, I don't pick up new cards, but I still play a lot of games because there's, you know, scenes around those older formats.
Yeah, like
it can be rewarding.
The old card game other than Dragon Ball that I'm real fond of is because it was my first card game ever. Well, no, it was probably Magic actually, but I was way too young to really grasp Magic. I was way too young to grasp this game too, I think. But I played like the Cypher Star Trek. And I still play a lot of the Cypher Star Trek.
Isn't there still like a rules community for that, or like an online group of
online cards? Basically, honestly, everything I did with Retro, I straight lifted from the Star Trek.
Them keeping it all alive and everything.
I took what they did because I went to Gen Con a couple years after the Score time, and I saw what they were doing. I was like, man, that's awesome. So they were sitting there playing. They had like, 10 to 15, 20 people sometimes. And I was like, I'm just going to do that with Dragon Ball and see if it works. And
it did.
The first ever retro tournament we set up, I had space for 8 people, and we had like 50 show up. And I had to go ask for more. And then the second year, I mean, it just escalated. I think at the height we were at like 110, maybe 2 years before the relaunch of the game.
Wow.
Yeah, because every year I had to ask for more people. And the first year it was $1 to play. And that's the base they would let me. I could not do it for free because I had to do it at least $1 to get it listed in the guide. And then as I needed more space because the game was getting popular, and the thing that blew my mind too is those last couple of years, almost half the people who were playing were people who did not play the original game. They got
that's interesting. Yeah,
they got into it because they just kind of like were late in the Dragon Ball, and one of the community, there's a podcast at the time, and they focused on dead card games, and they stumbled across retro, and they were like, this is the coolest thing we've seen, man. These people are super passionate.
So it was like the focus testing for the relaunch in Panini, basically. The fact that you had players at that did not have nostalgia for the original game.
Yeah.
I'd be remiss not to mention Overpower is really good about that's been dead for 20 years, and it still has, like Star Trek, and like you did with retro, like you're saying, they still have tournaments, they still have new cards. So
yeah. Overpower, I played a little bit of that back in the day too. Yeah, it was super interesting. Because the thing too, I was positive when PanZ came out that I was like, you guys are going to have a chance, like those players. I was like, you guys are going to have a chance to experience the game like now in production and stuff like that. And they honestly, like, I would say less than 10% of those guys actually played PanZ. They had no interest in playing a game in production. Like they were like, we don't want to have to keep up with sets, and we don't want to.
Well, exactly. That's me now. That's it. I don't want to keep up with games that have new sets coming out. Right?
They were like, we love just printing the cards off the internet and playing. We love just like one guy was obsessed with Gundam, and he played Broly or something, but he would put Gundam, like
reskin it all to Gundam.
But every card in his deck was reskinned to be Gundam, like Gundam Wing.
That's the value of a game in a box, a static game, a dead game. It's, you can customize it. You can evaluate it from infinite different angles, forever. If the game is good, if the environment you picked is good for a dead game, it's like chess, right? Or even a more apt analogy, it's like Go. You can play that forever, and it should be fun, even if you didn't change decks, but you're allowed to. So people will be playing, even if it's just me, RetroZ formats forever, because there's always something about. Here's an example. I was talking to Sean the other day about Android Saga format. Mm-hmm. So Saiyan was usually played as Styles. that was Dez's name for it. Styles, 50 card Trunks ball. And then when people did try to play it non-ball, like Saiyan was never used, Namekian was never used at first. It was super aggro beatdown, like, oh, I'm gonna try to draw a bunch of cards, make you lose stages, and play physical beats. I think in that environment, you can make an energy beatdown, like kind of like a control deck with straining energy maneuver, like everyone else uses and stuff, but kind of basically like mid-range Saiyan energy beatdown or whatever. And this is how many years after Android Saga existed? 22, whatever. And I'm texting Sean, hey, what do you think about straining energy move in Trunks Android Saga environment energy decks? That's the enjoyment of these old games, and it speaks to why people stay interested in them for as long as they do. Besides the collectability, there's
I think that's why one of the reasons retro was super popular is there's pretty much a static amount of the cards, and we introduced just enough to keep things fresh.
Just a little spice, so that it's not, what's the new meta game? What's the whole new environment?
One of the decks that got very popular was there's a couple of variants of like mid-range Saiyan energy decks that were very popular and actually very good. Good, but it took like 3 years of everybody playing retro to get one of those decks through.
And there is a lot of, now that you mentioned that, there's a lot of Kit Buu energies that were so cool and never got a chance to be played in GT, really. There's like Saiyan Energy Bullet, I think it is, or other ones like that.
Saiyan Energy Bullet was one of those ones, I think, if I'm trying to remember correctly. Trunks was very popular energy character. Vegeta. I know we tinkered around with like an actual like energy-based Broly stuff. But that was more
remember Brawly's legendary key explosion from GT? Energy for 15, you discard, I draw. Well, just for some reason, talking about Brawly energy reminded me of that.
Yeah, so one of the live, when the stream, as it happened, it'll already have happened when this airs, but earlier in this stream, a live component of this was going to be with Chippy. And one of the things that we're going to do is I'm going to ask him like to define what each one of the new mechanics that was added in Shadow Dragon does. Like shift.
What are they? So shift, augment,
mask.
Mask, that one's easy.
And I can remember, like, I think it was augment, where Gibson and I were playing it one way, Kunkel was playing it one way, and then Sager was playing it another way. And we all, and then when the rule book, like, we actually got the printed stuff, it didn't actually work the way any of us were playing.
I just remember being broken, right? We only mainly playtested Focus, so we never tried expanded with those effects. But you could start with 3-year invited, Vic Drill, Champ Drill, or whatever, and you could, or was that shift? The one that let you blow away a non-combat to get card advantage, basically.
I'm pretty shifting. I think you shifted a card in your hand.
I'd be interested to know if Chippy can answer all of these. Ask him.
Honestly, I was like, I honestly don't think I can name what they all do anymore.
Ask him about old school beatdown, because that has every single mechanic on it. It's like shifted ultra rare, augmented old Z card.
I have one of those tins. So I'm gonna open it up. I'm gonna pull it out, and I'm gonna be. I need you to explain
every keyword.
I want you to explain everything this card does.
Train, that was another one. Train, I have no idea what it does, but there was a mechanic called Train where you had to like do something.
They were all like theoretically like augment was blue, mask black, shift was sand, train was red, I think.
Yeah, red chopstick Fu Master or something like that was Train.
We didn't have Namekian in GT. No.
I don't think it existed in GT.
There's no Piccolo.
There's no Namekian Mastery. It would be like Dende or something. And
I forgot there was no Namekian in all of that entire format.
We're lucky that in Panini we're allowed, surprisingly, to put Gohan on Namekian cards. Or you start running out of screenshots. Like, you can't make more Namekian stuff. You got to have Piccolo.
Well, I mean, pretty much everybody accepts that Piccolo is Gohan's father, so sure.
Yeah.
Namekian.
Father's it.
All righty, man. I'm gonna let you go. We're getting close.
All right, yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
Looking forward to watching the stream myself.
Yeah. So hopefully, we're all for a good cause. So this is the bookend of the content, and then after this, Josh and I are going to be hosting like an open Zoom happy hour after party thing. So hopefully, we'll have like 100 people in Zoom just talking about the old cards.
Awesome. I'm going to try to tune in for that.
Yeah. So, all right. Do you have any closing comments? I know a couple of the other guys, mostly were Score, but they talked kind of like a closing segment. You can do it in two ways. what do you remember about your time at Score? And fondly or negative or whatever, the good, the bad, the ugly. What do you remember fondly, good, bad, ugly about PanZ? Because you were there for both sides of those things pretty much like I was.
What I remember most about ScoreZ from the player side was obviously what everybody always says about why they like Dragon Ball Z, the community. You make friends, you make lifelong friends that you stay friends with outside of DBZ. And it's a different group of players. It's not as maybe intense as Magic necessarily, but it's also not as maybe younger skewing as Yu or something. So that's what I remember mainly from a player, meeting people like Tim. I still talk to fairly regularly. Sean, I met through Dragon Ball, one of my closest friends still. So working on ScoreZ, I would say, is eye-opening to go from being, you're like the mega fan on one side of it, and then you see how the sausage is made on the other side, and it's like, this is what was going on back here. Not in a negative way of like, oh, they're all goofballs or whatever, but you realize nothing's perfect. And the layers and layers of compromises that have to be made to get a product on the shelf are unimaginable until you actually start doing it yourself.
That was interesting because this came up with some of the other people who, because I when I was talking to Ake, I was like, Ake, you kind of set with a prototype for what would become the typical Score employee, the player who did well, comes in, smart, intelligent, well-spoken. And I was like, if you weren't successful in that transition, it would have never opened the door for any of the rest of us, And
a good point. And he basically did everything right in the sense of what happens if you let a really good player like behind the scenes and now start working on the game, because I don't know how much that, had been considered before. And he was obviously great at it. So it made them probably more likely to be like, okay, let's start talking to like when all the Kid Blue playtesters came in and they flew 30 of us in with a per diem and stuff.
Yeah. And then I know a couple people said like they were like somewhat surprised at how small everything, like the games part of that company was never large. It was not a big, massive entity, like compared to like when you look at what WotC has,
right?
And Nintendo was doing with Pokemon. I mean, it was a motley little crew of people, and everybody did like 5 things. Like it was rare that the designer was the guy out judging the tournaments, and
that's true.
Guys working and built, like I was designing an Inuyasha out on the road, building the convention booths and stuff.
Right. And everyone just chipping in any way they could. It was a smaller, like when you're a player and you've never even been in a building like that behind the scenes or whatever, you imagine people are designing cards with lab coats on and there's like high-tech back computers going on and they're looking at the readouts like, oh, no, this won't do for playtesting. And it's not how it works. It's more like someone getting a phone call saying, you can't use that screenshot. This set is actually not going to ship on this date. The set needs to be this amount of cards, not this many because it's coalition error or whatever. So my main takeaway from Score was just that it was eye-opening to get back to your question of what was it like working there, because you realize the designers especially are doing the best they can. So when you see a bad card and I want, and you have access to Chippy and I'm walking around like, hey, what's the deal with this? This is so dumb. And it's like, well, part of that is last night they told him he needed to change 12 cards in this set for screenshot purposes or whatever, and he just made up on the spot, or stuff like that. So you realize the reality of card game making when you do it yourself. What was the second part? Oh, to answer the second part of your question, Panini stuff. Just, it was a great experience. I wish it had gone on longer. Obviously, we could have done a lot more with that. The playtesters that were on that game were all obviously very passionate. Yourself and George included. So it was cool to work on something where people cared about it and wanted to, we basically, all of us, everybody that worked on that game cared about nothing else other than making the best game possible for people to have the most fun playing. Like that's what we were trying to do. And maybe in some sense, like that was a negative as far as like, there wasn't a lot done on the business side of that game, but as far as what we could control, the design part and everything, like we did everything we could. So my takeaway from that would be just hopefully people enjoyed what we did put out, because as you can attest to, we put long hours on those games trying to make an interesting game for people. So
Well, if one thing I've learned over the last 10 years is that the uniqueness of this game and everything, if you give it another 10 years, probably get another crack at it. Somebody will take the reins.
Wouldn't that be interesting to see round revision 3, someone's next take on it, and they're 20 years after that, they're doing an interview going, can you believe we had to keep critical attacks, or whatever. They're like, that we had to build on top of crits or.
Yeah, like Ake and I talked about crits, and I was real impressed with that mechanic too. Because to me, it solved a lot of these weird esoteric rule issues.
I just wish it hit drills too. In hindsight, if we had hit drills, that would have gone a long way. I think not all setups, but drills.
Yeah. Well. On that note, I think we're going to close out here.
Yeah, that went. That was fun though.
I haven't talked to you in a long time.
I know. It's been a while.
It probably would have been like Worlds. That last World Tournament would have been the last time. So.
Right, because you missed San Diego a few years now, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, work had been crushing me. This was the first year I was going to get to go to Gen Con because I didn't have anything booked, and then COVID happened, and I was like, oh, okay. But a little bit of hindsight, you hadn't heard this, but all this programming that I had set up for this thing, most of these things originally I was going to do 2 years ago because it was the 10-year anniversary of the retro site. And I was going to produce a bunch of this content and put it out weekly as interview videos for an entire month of August, which would have been the 10-year anniversary. So I got slammed with work and never got a chance to do it. And then I was digging through files and whatnot. And the Hunter Burton aspect of this, our big event that we were going to do in March got canceled and then got pushed until July and got canceled. So I was really trying to think of something that I could do to kind of help them out and put some awareness on their cause. And I just stumbled across my 10-year anniversary doc that I had written out and stuff. And all the names on there were people I was going to talk to. I wanted to talk to then. There's a couple of people, unfortunately, I couldn't get to this time because just the timing wasn't working out with some of the stuff going on in their professional lives. But that doesn't mean we can't do another round at some other point to touch on some
30-year reunion. And also, it sounds like you've got to maybe plan for a Yu Hakusho roundtable. Some point.
Yeah, that sounds
get Sager, get Gibson.
Very feverish about that, and it always blows my mind because I was never personally a fan of that show, but people adore that show. And you watch YouTube, and there's a lot of Yu Hakusho stuff, and almost anything you touch on, somebody like 30 years old is talking about Yu. They almost always bring up the card game because that was one of the few products that came out about Yu during that time.
That makes sense. So why it's so desirable now.
Yeah, because this came up too with some of the Score stuff. There's a bunch of, at the time when Dragon Ball, like Saiyan Saga and Frieza Saga were so popular, one of the things that was a success was it was one of the few products on the market that, while it wasn't the greatest game ever, it looked good, and it was widely available. So it was a Dragon Ball thing that was not a T-shirt that fans could buy. Because I don't know if you remember the action figures at that time.
Yeah, they're a joke.
Very bad, and the video games were pretty much you had to import all of them. And
there was only 3, but I know you want to get off. But speaking back to your point about the cards looking good, the card back is, as I understand it, the reason why they won the bid for the licensing.
Well, I have another story that I learned from a meeting later on about that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, okay. Why they even went in there to bid on the thing in the first place. But yeah, you are right. The reason they got the bid was because the card back was so good. I don't know if you've ever heard.
It still looks cool. Like it's got that 2000s era CGI of like the little swirl under it. Almost feels like
it's a very iconic card back.
For sure.
Yeah, but years later, at one point when Konami was going to take the Yu-Gi-Oh license back from Upper Deck, the owner of the company came through and kind of asked us, hey, if I get Yu-Gi-Oh, can we start making it? Can we just take it over? And we were like, well, you're going to have to staff up a lot to do it. Well, it turned out that I guess at some point in the late 90s or something, she had gone to Japan and her son had gotten really obsessed with Yu-Gi-Oh. So she came back to America and was like, I want this property. Let's go get it. So she sent like the salespeople out to purchase it. So they saw Goku, came back and were like, we found it. And she's like, okay, let's put in a bid and buy it. And that's when they designed like the card back and everything. And she honestly didn't know that was until way into the process, and it
Oh,
made
it's an anime character, close enough.
well. Look at Yugi, like Yugi's hair,
Yeah.
Goku's hair.
Right. Just someone glancing at it that's not familiar with it at
Yeah,
all.
it kind of, and she was sitting in a meeting, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I'm so glad Dragon Ball was successful. I really thought I was buying Yu-Gi-Oh. I was just really confused. I didn't know the difference, and I was like, what is going on here?"
And think of everything that's come since then as a result of that mistake.
Yeah,
Reboot, retro, all that.
All an accident, literally an accident.
Another tidbit I did not know.
Yeah, it made sense too, because they were like, we're just going to print, like the impression was like, they were like, we're just going to purchase this thing and release the cards, and buying
that are already made, right? That they didn't think that it
thing. And then that makes, because Jim Ward never worked in Dallas or anything. He did it all remotely, like faxing in the stuff from
this
Milwaukee.
Makes so much more sense now.
Yeah, and I was like, that makes complete sense now. Like they literally didn't they didn't buy the property and were like, now we have to build a department. They're like, oh, we can't just print a pre-existing thing.
That's hilarious.
So yeah, pretty wild. All righty. Well,
Well, it was definitely great catching up with you, and hopefully we had some interesting DBZ related content for the viewers. So
I'm sure everybody will love it. So I'm gonna go ahead and sign off on this recording here.
I'll talk to you later. See ya.
Later.